and they told us specifically, we're losing $2,286 on this route. What we really need is more people to A, sign up for memberships, or you to tell your friends about us. If you do that, we can bring these routes back. If not, this is our reality. And I loved that because I appreciated that company more after reading that, because they told me the truth. They didn't just erase a route that made my life harder. And I think at the end of the day, they can rest easier knowing that they were transparent. They weren't trying to pull the wool over my face or anything like that. It was just their reality. And I think if we can just be real with end consumers, treat them like people, keep coming back to that, I just want to be talked to and treated like a person, the winning strategy is right there.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
I use one word all smushed together to describe the time I spend on the job: work life. I'm not talking about balance here. I'm simply saying, yes, we have a home life, but we have a work life too. Every hour, every minute you spend working rolls up into that grand, big, mysterious number of time you have on this planet, which means what we do at work matters. The decisions we make are part of who we are, the fiber of our being. And it's why I love a lesson in the guest application from my next guest. Find ways to live your company's values in everything you do. So true. Joining us now to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Ra Mahtani, Head of Buyer Marketing for North America at Alibaba.com. Thanks for joining us, Ra.
Hey, thank you for having me, Daniel. You know, I've been listening to the podcast as a fan for so long. It feels great to look at you and hear your voice in person.
Well, that's great to hear, and I'm excited to hear and learn a lot from your stories because you had a really interesting application. But first, let's tell the audience who they're listening to, just cherry picking from your background a bit. You were a social media manager at Volvo, manager of digital communications at Jack in the Box, mini marketing communications lead at BMW, and now, as we mentioned, you're the head of buyer marketing for North America at Alibaba.com. Alibaba.com serves buyers and suppliers from 190 countries and regions around the world, and Ra has managed marketing budgets ranging from $8 million to as high as $110 million. He currently manages a team of 6. So, Ra, what is your day like as head of buyer marketing for North America at Alibaba.com?
Yeah, Daniel, it ranges so wildly, but I think, you know, as I look at my day, I try and do a few things to set myself up for success, because to me, mood, the way you approach your team, and the energy that you bring to your workplace is so important. So my hacks, right? I start the night before, where I set myself up with just the must-dos. What's my list that I need to attack the day? And then when I wake up in the morning, family and sunlight. Sunlight is my secret hack. So if it's not sunny out and I can't be outside for 10 minutes with my son, I'll be sitting at my desk with one of those sun lamps kind of shining on me. So I start the day all radiant and excited. But, you know, the day, it ranges so widely. My favorite part of the day is spending time with our buyers. And we have over 40 million buyers on our platform. But hearing from them, hearing their stories of how they built their brands and what makes them successful and the struggles that kind of underpin that, that's what gets me excited, and it can build all of our plans around.
You know, I'm glad you say that, because we get so focused on data and analytics and metrics and all these dashboards we have that we forget that sometimes maybe we could just talk to the people that purchased our products, the people that we're meant to serve. So I love that. Well, let's jump into some stories from the things you made in marketing. That's a great thing that we get to do as marketers. Like I've said, I've never been like a podiatrist or an actuary or something, but I don't feel like they leave work having built stuff. We actually make stuff that we could point out. I made that. So your first lesson is it's okay to flip the script sometimes. So what do you mean by that? How'd you learn that?
Yeah, you know, we often think of brands in almost boxes. And yes, as marketers, sometimes it's our responsibility to break through that box. But when I say it's okay to flip the script sometimes, you know, I worked on Mini, and I was the head of brand communications for Mini. And while we were there, Mini was positioned as this visceral kind of smash mouth, exciting disruptor in that automotive space. And all the advertising and communications really truly lived up to that. But we faced a bit of an issue, right? The consumer marketplace saw us at a certain price point, and they didn't necessarily connect the dots between why is this small kind of smash mouth exciting car priced at this point. So we decided, hey, let's look at some of the data around how people use our cars. And a lot of what customers told us was, as they're behind the wheel, it felt like their escape from their daily routine. And we took that and we kind of amplified it a few notches. But we partnered with this amazing musician called Labyrinth. And Labyrinth makes obviously incredible music, but we took this old cowboy classic song called Don't Fence Me In, and we had him re-record that while he's sitting inside of a Mini. And we put him in the streets of Los Angeles, but we erased all the traffic, all the chaos and noise, and all the headache of driving through Los Angeles to make that Mini feel like an escape. So again, coming back to flipping the script, right? We took the script of what it meant to be Mini, but we flipped it into an escape rather than this visceral kind of outwardly noisy machine.
I love that. I wonder if you have any tips or something specific you do for empathy, to get empathy to the customer. So you mentioned talking to buyers, but I wonder if there's anything else you do. And I'll give you a quick example. I worked on a free thought tool that we've created, and it's basically a series of questions and worksheets, and it forces you to be empathetic with the customer, right? Because it asks questions like understanding what context they view their message in. This is one great example. Like when you work on that TV commercial, like when I would work on videos or TV commercials, I would be in a studio, right? With high def audio, with this beautiful screen, right? With catered lunch and leather sofas. And you know what I mean? But the customer, they're like maybe looking at it on their phone, or they are watching it on TV, but it's a commercial break and oh no, their kid spilled something. And so, that context is such a great thing for empathy. So I wonder for you, talking to your customers, one great example. Is there anything else you do for that empathy to help really understand your customers and where they're coming from?
Yeah, I adore this question, Daniel. Look, I think as marketers think about customers, it's important to put ourselves in their shoes. And quite frankly, that's kind of an easy thing to say, right? Putting it into practice is the hard part. So what I really like to do is sit down and get face-to-face time with those customers. I want to understand not just how they interact or use our product, but what's going on in their life. Who are they? What are they about? Because that tells me more than the data, the demographic backgrounds, some of their psychographic details. I just want to understand you. And I think that helps me position myself to create content or build campaigns that are hyper relevant to their situation, what's going on in their life, and understand the culture that they're associating themselves with.
So when we talk about Alibaba North America, I would think there is such a diversity of buyers you have. And so I wonder how you organize that for yourself or your team or in your head. I know, we talk about things like personas, we talk about those types of things, and maybe they work, maybe they don't, I don't know. But for you, so you're talking to people, you're getting that three-dimensional view. I love that because sometimes we're busy and we take that shortcut and it's only about like what has to do with our product, right? But I would imagine then you're talking to people, yes, there's themes, but there's such a diversity there. So how do you then take that, manage that, and use that for yourself and your team and internally with your company to actually inform your decisions?
Yeah, it's quite difficult to do transparently, but the reality is we like to break our buyers down into the level that they're at in their business rather than looking at them as, kind of data points on a spreadsheet. Now, the data points are important to us and can inform our strategy, but where the buyer is at in their journey is often more important and telling to how we approach them. So, in the last 2.5 years alone in the US, more small businesses than in our entire history as a company have been formed. We've got 32 million plus small businesses out in the world. But knowing that stat, right, that tells us that there's so many that are new to this journey. They're learning how to build a business. They're learning what it means to craft a product and how to make that product relevant to people. We can approach our messaging completely differently, just knowing that simple statistic and breaking those buyers down into that category.
Yeah, understanding the journey is a way I love to communicate with the customers. And if anyone, I like literature, I'm a writer, you're familiar with the hero's journey, right? It's a very famous thing that takes people through a story. That's a great thing to look at too, to think about like, okay, my customer's a hero. Where are they in this journey? And what do they need to understand at that point? But you mentioned data too. And data obviously is important. You say, let data inform, don't let it dictate. And you learned this while working at Jack in the Box. So how did you learn this lesson?
Yes. I don't want to use this phrase, right? Let data inform, don't let it dictate, to undermine the importance of data. I think we all know as marketers, we hear it all the time. We have basically encyclopedia stacks of data. What's important to me is that we're using that data to kind of slightly steer our mindset towards what we're building, right? It's not the final decision maker. We still need that human touch in marketing. And what we all do as marketers is bring that point of view, the perspective, the gut feeling into that. And at Jack in the Box, we had a data point that said the large majority of our customers supported No Kid Hungry, a great charity. Now, your mind would typically go straight to, all right, let's find ways at restaurant level or beyond to get customers to donate to that charity. And yes, the data told us that it's the simplest approach. However, now we have to put on our brand marketing hat. And when you're wearing that hat, right, at Jack in the Box, we asked ourselves the question, what would Jack do? And Jack would have fun with his audience. And the fun way we approached that was we built this project called Project Moonhat. And Project Moonhat required a $66 trillion investment to put Jack's iconic yellow hat on the moon. And we put this out on our social channels. And a lot of people, when they clicked the link, were really surprised to find that this wasn't a silly marketing campaign to put a hat on the moon. In fact, it was to get people to come play with us and donate to No Kid Hungry. And we also found that, people that saw the campaign and tried to take away from the message by saying, why are you doing something so silly? Our audience would come to the rescue and say, hey, click the link, go see what it's all about. So in that instance, we just use that data to say, yeah, we want to donate to No Kid Hungry, but it's not going to dictate how we approach the campaign. We need to use that gut feeling, the marketer's instinct to come up with the right way in.
And so that right way, so just to be clear, you want to explain, it was Project Moonhat? You want to explain what that was?
Yeah, Project Moonhat was a microsite that we created. ProjectMoonhat.com doesn't exist today anymore since it was a few years ago. But essentially, we were fundraising $66 trillion to take Jack's hat and try and place it on the moon as a marketing stunt.
I love that. And so I wonder, where do you go for your inspiration for creative ideas? Because something you said made me think of where I go. So I love stand-up comedy. I not just that I like stand-up comedy, but I love listening to podcasts or to interviews and to understanding how comedians work their craft. Because I think their craft is pretty similar to ours, right? They've got a value proposition out there. They're trying to get a conversion, which is a laugh. And one thing I hear from a lot of comedians is you don't go with the first idea, right? You have that first idea. It's clever. It works. You like it, but you got to work it. And you get to the second or third or fourth level, and that's where the gold is. And for Jack in the Box, it sounds like that's what you did. That first level idea was No Kid Hungry. But then when you worked it and got deeper and said, how would our brand do this and how would Jack do this? That idea of, well, we're trying to put Jack on the moon, is a very, very clever way versus what everyone else would do. What a lot of other brands would do is some altruism. We're such a great brand. Look at this. 1% of sales go to whatever. So like I said, for me, it's stand-up comedy. For you, is there something, in your creative role as a marketer and your role as a leader that you go to in another industry or in entertainment to help you get ideas?
Yes, stand-up comedy, Daniel, is such a good example, right? Because they find human truths in everything and make it just hyper relatable. And that's the gut punch. I totally get it. I relate to it. And I like that example a lot. Sometimes I will turn to things like stand-up comedy, but there are also other layers or levers that I would pull to spark the creative juices. One is on Reddit. Reddit has a very funny way of doing things, right? They are a delightfully helpful community, but also they'll always come in with really cheeky responses and replies to things. But oftentimes, right, that a lot of truth is said in jest phrase, Reddit nails that a lot of the time. So I'll find inspiration there. And then last but not least, there's a lot of character-driven kind of craziness happening in my head, meaning With Jack in the Box, Jack could inspire. What is his character? Would he actually do this or not? Does it fit the script of who that person is? For a brand like that, you could even use a celebrity as a framework. Would Harrison Ford, for example, say that? He has a tongue-in-cheek approach to things, which may be relatable to an audience. So you can use that for inspiration too. But I try and search far and wide, but using those human truths as the real center of it all.
Yeah, human truths. I love that you mentioned Reddit. I interviewed the CMO of Mint Mobile on How I Made It Marketing. And one thing that he mentioned is after a campaign launches, he's on Reddit and he is looking and he's seeing in real time people's reactions and he's interacting with them as a CMO of Mint Mobile. And that's something we have access to today. Such a great opportunity to see that water cooler conversation that, where neighbors used to talk to each other in action through social media, through forums, kind of really getting in there and seeing what our audience is doing. So this is something I mentioned in the opening. I really love this. You say, find ways to live your company's values in everything you do. And you mentioned you feel like you're really doing that now at Alibaba.com. So how are you doing that?
Yeah. As I think about that, right, find ways to live your company's values in everything. One thing that just directly drew me to Alibaba.com was that the entire company was formed around the belief that we are built to help small and medium business owners connect directly with the largest network of global suppliers. And we still live that today, but we are a companion. We are kind of a co-pilot in that business journey. So one thing that we did this past year at Alibaba.com was we built a program called the Manifest Grants Program. And what that was effectively a fund program where we could help small and medium business owners develop the right fundraising to build their business to the next level. And there was an entire application process within that. But what we were looking for was the story. What have you gone through on that back end of building your business? Because we know the human truth within being an entrepreneur is that it's not always easy. The sunshine and rainbows that you see in the D2C front ends of their stores do not always line up with the struggle and everything that they went through on the back end. So we wanted that story to understand, what is your journey? What are you trying to build towards? And how can a grant like this really help you achieve and unlock that? So we did all that. We collected a list of thousands and thousands of applications. And as we sifted through them, these incredible stories really rose to the top. And we ended up doing a ton of content creation around them. And today we maintain relationships with those folks. We're truly living the values of our brand, right? We bring them to speak at conferences and help other business owners do what we help them do. So we try and keep it 360 all the time.
So you have that application out there. I wonder if there was a question or two or some way you worded it or something you put in there that really helped you get the stories out. Because, when I talk to marketers, we all want that UGC, user-generated content, but sometimes they struggle on how to get it, right? So I wonder if there was anything that was specifically about the application process, how you promoted it, what you asked them there, that got you kind of the most value in understanding their stories and then being able to tell them.
Yeah, we were quite direct, Daniel, in the question asking. Of course, there was the standard, tell us about your business and things like that. But we asked them tell us one time where you felt like you weren't going to make it. And that question gave us a lot of insights. And look, when you're doing research, you don't want to be that direct in pointing them. But in this case, we wanted to point them towards something. And we heard a lot of beautiful stories, not just struggle, but a lot of here's why I started my business, because I wanted to help my parents stop doing a job that required physical labor. Amazing. That is such a great reason for you to build a business. We want to help you.
That's great. So in the first half of the episode, talking about building a business, we talked about things that Ra learned from the things he built in marketing. In the second half of the podcast, we talk about lessons we learned from the people we collaborated with, because that's great parts of marketing. We get to build things and we get to build them with people. But before we get there, let me just let everyone know that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MECLABS Institute, the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa. You can join us for an AI Guild session Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Learn more at meclabs.com/AI-briefing. That's MECLABS.com/AI-briefing to join a free AI Guild session. All right, with that, let's talk about now, like I said, lessons you learned from people you collaborated with. First, you mentioned Dean Shaw, the VP of Communications for the Americas region at Volvo US. And you said from Dean, you learned dig into human behavior to create people first messaging. So how did you learn that from Dean?
Yeah, Dean, still a mentor of mine to this day. But, when he first joined the Americas region at Volvo, we spent a lot of time sitting down and chatting. And he taught me a lot of early lessons in my career about leadership, empathy, and compassion, and speaking to people that work with you, work for you, and your peers. But one of the most important lessons he taught me was about people first messaging, right? And we talk a lot as marketers about customer first messaging, but Dean flipped that a little bit and inspired me by saying it's really people first messaging. And it comes back to a point, Daniel, that you made early on. How do we find that empathy in what we're doing? And Dean approached it that way. What we were talking about that day was safety. Now, safety is kind of a mundane and boring topic, but Volvo made safety very, very important and is a core reason for people buying those vehicles. And one thing that Dean put in place as he was doing that was thinking directly about how a consumer thinks, feels, and experiences these things related to safety. And he said to me something very simple. How do you react when you're driving to work one day and somebody does something like cuts you off on the road or does something that irritates you on the road? How do you react? And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to be ticked off. I'm not going to love that somebody did something to me on the road. How could you do that to me on the road? And he said, well, that's simply your experience, right? And the way you react to that, we must position safety in a very similar vein. Safety is never about something that you, the customer, did wrong. Safety is about everything wrong that could happen around you, the things you have to watch out for in your blind spots. Well, we've got you covered with blind spot indicators, with backup sensors, with crash prevention sensors. It's not because you were distracted and took too long to brake. It's because the person in front of you braked too hard. And those were, really powerful words to me because it allowed me to just reposition the way I looked at almost everything, not just safety, but everything going forward was influenced by that simple conversation.
Well, I think that's a great example of the human truth we were talking about, like stand-up comedy and those things, right? Because when you say that, the thing I think of is that classic line of, everybody that drives slower than me is a slowpoke and everyone that drives faster than me is a maniac.
Yep.
It's that us-centric view of the world that we have to take. I want to ask you about, this may be a nuance, but you said people first and not customer first. I want to ask you about that because of this. So we did a study. We were trying to find the right words. We called it customer first marketing, and it's hard to find the right words, but we're trying to communicate an idea. We did some research, and basically we surveyed 2,400 American customers, and half of them we asked, tell us about a company that you had a bad experience with, and half of them we asked, tell us about a company you had a good experience, and then we asked them a series of questions. But the biggest differentiation that was really interesting, it was whether the customer thought that company was acting in their best interests. So the company could do a whole slew of things, good or bad. Their marketing could do all these things. But when they felt that it was customer first, when that marketing was customer first, they were way more forgiving. They were way more likely to purchase again, way more likely to, recommend the company. And so it comes back to kind of that intention that we communicate through our brand, through our value proposition, through our marketing, that yes, we are acting in their best interest or we are not. So that's what I want to follow up and ask, okay, is there a difference between people first and customer first? What do you see the difference is? And either way, you're talking about how to kind of intuit that. Either way, how does that affect those very difficult decisions sometimes you have to make, those 50-50 decisions on what the brand should do either in product rollouts or either in the campaigns?
Yeah. It's
definitely a lot there. I'll let you unpack it.
There is, but it's definitely a nuance, right? At the end of the day, they can be effectively thought of as kind of the same thing. The reason I like to separate them in my mind is we think of customers as people that are actively buying from us or shopping our services or products. When I say people first, I'm really just thinking about how can we do something, say something, or build something that is centered around, again, that human truth, which we kind of keep coming back to. But the reality is people in their daily lives have lots of things that happen to them and that they experience that are not connected to what we are building as products. And if we can connect to them on that level, truly understanding them, who they are, what they believe in, what they're experiencing, it's a little bit different to me than trying to connect with them as a product speaking to you as a customer.
No, I really like that. It reminds me of the saying that only technology companies and drug dealers use the word users. And sometimes that internal language we use can affect how we think of the customer. But I also want to ask you, when it comes to people first, like what that actually means as a brand, as a company. Like we get into those decisions sometimes. Some decisions we make are fairly easy, but there's those kind of 50-50 jump ball decisions that we have to make that are difficult. That it comes down to either, look, the company's got to take a hit on cost. We got to take a hit on our marketing. There's something we got to do in our marketing. Or we really do have to put the people first and the customer first. And I'll give you one example for me, and I'd love to hear your example, is where I found it really helps is having a clearly stated value proposition. Like when you have that value proposition outlined, answer to a question, if I'm your ideal customer, why should I buy from you than any of your competitors? That really helps. And when you get into those meetings as the marketer in the room and you're able to say, wait a minute, do we live up to our value proposition? Because sometimes when other parts of the business are making decisions, they forget how it affects a customer. And a quick example of my personal life, I bought from Home Depot, I bought like a dryer. I think it was a dryer washing machine. And this was back before I worked at home. I'm at home simply to receive this. And I live on a cul-de-sac and I'm waiting for them. They should be there soon. And I see a truck drive by. It was like a van or a pickup truck or something with a trailer that had, some stuff behind it. And, I'm like, well, that's not them, And then they swing back around and it's them. And it shocked me. I'm like, wait a minute, I bought from Home Depot. I thought a nice Home Depot truck would pull up. People would show up in crisp Home Depot uniforms and they would come up and deliver. And obviously, there was someone in logistics that say, hey, we can save 10% on each delivery if we outsource this to independent contractors. And the marketer wasn't in the room or wasn't able to say, hey, here's Home Depot's value proposition. And that is a customer touch point and a thing of value. And that's not putting the customer first. It's not putting people first. We need to take a little bit of the hit on logistics. So for you, you don't have to name names or anything like that, but have you been in that room and have you had to, as you said, this is making these hard decisions, had to make a decision or advocated for the people, and how do you do that? Like any tips on doing that or how you do that?
Yeah, 100%. I think, that was a really great illustration too of the simple things that can get decided and call it a boardroom or on a Zoom meeting that, we as marketers might not even think of as we think about the downstream effect it has on that end person. Now, I think the most important thing in this process is transparency. People just want you to be real with them. Now, I take a bus to work every single day. And the bus is from a company called Boxcar. And this company started as kind of a boutique service to get people that have slightly limited access to major public transportation, access to New York City. I live close to New York City. And this bus realized that on 3 of its morning routes, it was losing money because there weren't enough people getting on the bus. And they started sending emails, weekly updates to all of us as customers that said, hey, here's our reality. We're starting to lose money on these routes. And they told us specifically, we're losing $2,286 on this route. What we really need is more people to sign up for memberships or you to tell your friends about us. If you do that, we can bring these routes back. If not, this is our reality. And I loved that because I appreciated that company more after reading that because they told me the truth. They didn't just erase a route that made my life harder. And I think at the end of the day, they can rest easier knowing that they were transparent. They weren't trying to pull the wool over my face or anything like that. It was just their reality. And I think if we can just be real with end consumers, treat them like people, keep coming back to that. I just want to be talked to and treated like a person. The winning strategy is right there.
That is great. I mean, I've also heard that called co-creation of value. And when we think of co-creation of value, it's normally like a make your own t-shirt type of thing or something like that, right? But that's a great example of that, bringing the customer in on that journey and saying, hey, we're providing this good or service to you. Help us keep providing it. And if we can't, here's why. It makes a lot of sense. Here's your next lesson. Respect the power of the rabbit. This is from Liz Wang, the global CMO of Alibaba.com. So, okay, Rob, what can we learn from the rabbit? How did you learn this in your discussion with Liz?
Yes, when I was new at Alibaba.com, I was sitting down with Liz, who's our global CMO, and we were talking about the Chinese New Year. And one thing that's amazing about Alibaba.com is we all deeply connect with each other as people. And I am fascinated as a person by other culture. What are you doing to celebrate and things like that? And Liz started to educate me a little bit about Chinese New Year. And she said, this year is the year of the rabbit. And next year is the year of the dragon. And I stopped and I said, everybody wants to be the dragon. And she paused and she said, but everybody needs to respect the power of the rabbit. And to me, that was just a deeply insightful kind of flip of the conversation to say, yeah, the underdog needs to be respected. And what we did after that was we kind of went on a tangent, right? The conversation inspired something related to work, something related to our customers and to entrepreneurs. And we built a series of content about the underdog story, kind of framed around that narrative, right? The rabbit should be respected.
Well, that gets me thinking of brand positioning and of working with what you have and how you work against your competitors. And I wonder if you have any examples of working against your competitors. Again, you don't have to mention names, but I'll give you an example. Marketers often complain to me about wherever they are, right? They're a small company. They're going against bigger competition. But what they don't realize is that the people in the big companies complain to me too. They're like, it's so difficult to change anything here, right? And so I think it's often easy to just look at that competition and say, oh man, they've got it made, versus what do we have? We have this. What is our value proposition? What are our assets? How do we position ourselves? If we're a small company, well, we can position ourselves as more nimble, more able to give, one-on-one service to the client, all of these things, right? If we're that big company, we can position ourselves as like, this extensive network of products, offerings, trust, solidity, these types of things. But sometimes as marketers, we just kind of get stuck in of looking at, the grass is always greener over there. It's better for the dragon, right? So I wonder for you, like, how is that kind of viewpoint? You gave us an example of how you build a campaign there for the underdogs. But have you ever taken that viewpoint against some of your competitors and saying like, okay, let's not look at them with jealousy. Let's look at what they have. But how can we kind of position ourselves against it with what we do have?
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question, right? Because the easy thing to do is to say to ourselves what you just mentioned, the grass is always greener, or, I wish I had what they had. And I think the mistake that we make, and I have to retrain my mind on this at all times, is not to look at what we don't have. It's to just completely lean into what makes you strong and what your tactical advantage is, right? Even in research, I think a really good example is research. We tend to gravitate towards asking customers, why don't you use this product? Why did you defect from this product? But that just creates like a self-fulfilling prophecy of negativity, right? We put the customer's mindset into, I need to think of ideas about why I didn't do this. Instead, the customer is just picking something because they appreciated the strength of what that product had, right? It's more often than not due to something you were lacking. It's due to something somebody else did better. They leaned into their strengths. So, this narrative about leaning into the power or respecting the power of the rabbit can always come back to, hey, the rabbit has speed, it has agility, it's leaning into its strength to, call it gain more respect than the dragon. And that's what we should do, no matter who we are, a giant company, a medium-sized company, a really small underdog in the industry. Just lean into what you do really, really well. Put your kind of blinders on and focus on that. And don't worry about how you could be losing to somebody else. I think that's the really, really positive approach to take to it.
Yeah, that also brings up a question about customer research. And I wonder how you learn about your customers. You mentioned a few things. I wonder if you engage in any A/B testing or any type of looking at their behavior, because you're talking about that survey data. That can be great and really insightful and qualitative. But as you mentioned, we can also prime them, right? Especially prime them if we say what's negative about this. I think the other challenge sometimes, it's very good to talk to customers, get close to them, understand them, but the gap can be that they don't understand these things themselves, right? I've heard it talked about before that we make decisions based on emotion and backfill with logic, even in business, even in B2B. So I wonder if to kind of narrow that gap, it sounds like you're engaged in a lot of face-to-face, a lot of survey. That's good. Do you ever engage in A/B testing or anything else where you're actually measuring behavior, measuring just performance and seeing what customers are doing?
Yeah, truthfully, recently we've gone away from doing too much A/B testing, and look, frankly, it's really easy with A/B testing to get lost in the minutia of I want to test this, CTA versus this CTA, and how much are we really learning on a macro scale in that situation? What I found to be the most effective thing is to understand directly from the customer, from the person, what is meaningful to them, and hear from it on a scale, right? You're not just saying one person's going to dictate everything about my product, but just when you hear something repeated several times by very similar groups of people, I think ultimately it allows you to build something that's going to be meaningful and solve whatever issue that they're having. I think to us, that's become the approach rather than any sort of scaled A/B testing. That still is happening on some of those smaller levels, but it's not the bigger business lessons that we're learning from A/B testing.
All right, so direct customer interaction and pattern recognition, I've heard as being called one of the most important things of intelligence, right? All right, and lastly, as when we talk about data, you said, here's one of your lessons. You could have piles and piles of data, but unless you know how to use the data correctly, it won't get you very far. So it ties into what you just said. You said you learned this from Steve Ambo, the Chief Strategy Officer of Richmond Day. And so how'd you learn this from Steve?
Yes, Steve was a prolific storyteller. And, when he told stories, he painted these vivid pictures with words. But one day he sat me down and he was telling me a story about his grandfather's farm. And he said his grandfather on his farm would get giant piles of manure delivered all the time. And Steve used that to illustrate a lesson about, if you had a farm and you got these piles of manure delivered every day and you just sat there and wondered, what the heck is somebody delivering poop to me for? You would never realize that this manure is the most powerful fertilizer in the world. And what we learned from that is, we can have these piles of data, like I referenced these encyclopedia stacks worth of data, but unless we know what to do with it, unless we know how to put that into action and make it powerful for us, it's useless. It's as useless as a pile of poop.
I love that example. Let me ask you about technology, because I think technology is kind of the same thing. So maybe technology would be the opposite. It seems like this shiny, golden, perfect thing that we can use, but if we don't use it the right way, it's not going to work anyway. So, right now, AI, boy, everyone's talking about that. There's all sorts of other technologies. I wonder if you have any viewpoint on so you talk about learning from the customer there. So how to use technology to ensure you're actually serving the customer based on what they tell you versus, what can happen a lot is just shiny object syndrome. So we've got this new golden thing, let's throw it in there. And it's like, well, why did we throw that on top of there? It didn't really help the customer.
Yeah, I think the balance really comes from trying to decide or really trying to feel out, do I want to leverage this technology to be buzzworthy and to be a first mover? Or am I actually going to use this technology to better my product or better that customer experience? And what we at Alibaba.com and even many of my previous roles, what we centered ourselves around is simply, will this make the customer's experience any better? Or is this just that shiny object syndrome? So I would always frame my mindset around and have to tell myself, this is not to win a Clio. This is not to win an Effie. This is to actually benefit the consumer. And, that always guides me back to center. The center is, let's help the customer first. Let's do what's right for the business. Let's not do what's right for us.
Perfect. Well, Rod, we've talked about so many different things about what it means to be a marketer in your stories. If you had to break it down, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer? What are you trying to be? What do you look for when you hire?
Yeah, typically I look for kind of three core things. Of course, there's a lot in character and personality, but the three kind of soft skills, if you want, that I look for are, one, a point of view that's really driven by curiosity. I want to know what you think of other work that's happening out there. What's your perspective on, hey, Threads is a new thing. What's the relevance to us as a brand? What's the relevance to our consumer? I need that point of view. I think it just benefits creative and strategy tremendously. That's one. The next would be, are you a doer at any level? That means as the CEO, as the CMO, or, down to an associate that we just recently hired, or to an intern? Are you the person that's willing to roll up your sleeves, get in the mix of things and get things done? My philosophy is I'll never ask someone on my team or someone that's a leader to me to do something that I'm not going to do myself. And that's important to me. Are you a doer? Can you get things done? But can you roll up your sleeves too at any level? And then last but not least, something we talked about before is incredibly important to me: empathy, right? We don't want any jerks or rude people on our teams. But not only that, like, can you directly associate with the customer and people? Can you put your strategies together, understanding what they're going through in their life, not just using numbers or click-through rates or anything like that to inform your decision? That is super, super important. Empathy has to be there.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Ryan. I learned so much from you, and I saw you act out the things we talked about through your stories as well. So I see you living what you look for as well. That's great. So thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you, Daniel. My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.